Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take complicated source material and, well, we give you the shortcut. Today, we're getting into something that sits right at that weird intersection of investment and insurance.
The segregated fund contract, or as you'll often hear it called an IVC, an individual variable insurance contract.
Right. And if you've ever seen the paperwork for one of these, you know it feels less like an investment and more like a serious legal commitment.
You'd be absolutely right. This isn't just about picking a fund. It's about suitability, it's about strict contractual rules, and some pretty intense regulations, especially around anti-money laundering here in Canada.
Yeah, we've gone through the instructional guides, the whole process, and our mission today is to give you a quick but really thorough map of a seg fund's entire life, from signing on the dotted line all the way to a payout.
And we should probably start with a detail that right away shows you this isn't a typical investment. I'm talking about the right of rescission, your right to cancel. You get a couple of days to back out, but here's the catch. If you cancel, the insurer gives you back the lesser of what you put in or what it's worth on the day you cancel.
Ouch. So if the market dips on day 2 and you cancel, you take the loss.
Exactly. It's a contractual reminder from the very first second that, yes, there's insurance protection, but market risk is real and it starts immediately.
Wow, okay. That's a powerful point to start on. Let's unpack this from the beginning then, the foundation of it all, the contract itself.
Right. The segregated fund contract is this binding legal document. It's between the insurer and you, the investor, and it's where all those unique protections come from.
So what is the insurer actually legally on the hook to provide? It's got to be more than just investing your money.
Oh, much more. They are contractually obligated to deliver the guarantees. That's the maturity and the death benefits.
Yeah.
They also have to spell out the exact math they use to figure out the fund's market value and its surrender value.
And the costs, I assume.
Absolutely. Full transparency on costs, how every fee is calculated, especially the management expense ratio, the MER. This isn't, a handshake deal. It's a legally binding promise.
So guarantees and costs have to be crystal clear, which I guess leads right into those disclosure documents you get.
And that right of rescission we just talked about, it's a mandatory part of the contract. You have to be told in writing that you have 2 business days after you get the purchase confirmation to cancel.
2 business days. That is incredibly fast. What if you miss that window?
Then you're just in the regular system. You'd have to look at withdrawal or surrender rules, and that could mean fees. But if you make it in those 2 days, you get your fees and charges back. But again,
You get the lesser of the 2 amounts.
you get the lesser amount. It really drives home that this is an investment wrapper, first and foremost.
Okay, so if the contract is the foundation, how do you actually get from that legal document to a client's real-life financial situation? That must be the application process.
Exactly. And this is where the investor has duties too. Your main job is to provide accurate, truthful information. The whole process relies on the agent, assuming that you, the investor, actually understand what you're signing.
What if there's like a language barrier or something?
The agent has to flag that. They have to stop, get a translator, find more information, whatever it takes to make sure there's real comprehension before anything moves forward.
I think the most interesting document in this whole process is something called the reason why letter. Why is that even necessary? Isn't a signed form enough?
It's about the burden of proof. The reason why letter is mandatory, and it basically turns a verbal conversation about suitability into an airtight documented record.
Ah, so it's not just I told you so.
Right. The agent is forced to write down facts, confirm your instructions, and identify which of your needs the product meets. And just as importantly, which needs it doesn't meet. It proves the sale was suitable.
So it's the agent's documented defense, built right into the process. The system is really designed to put the responsibility squarely on their shoulders.
Precisely. And once that's all done, then comes the initial deposit. Lump sum, transfer, or setting up a PA, a pre-authorized deposit.
And there's another little regulatory detail in there too, right? Something about spousal consent.
Yes, good point. In many places, if you're dealing with locked-in retirement funds, like from an old pension, you actually need your spouse's formal consent or a signed waiver before you can move that money into a seg fund.
It's an extra layer of protection for shared retirement assets.
Exactly.
Okay, let's switch gears and define the players here. The roles and registration status, because getting this wrong, registered versus non-registered, can cause huge tax headaches.
Oh, absolutely. You have to be precise. A registered contract, like an RRSP or TFSA seg fund, is all about tax benefits. For those, the owner must also be the annuitant.
And you need a social insurance number.
You need a SIN, and you can't transfer it to someone else or use it as collateral for a loan. It's locked in for its purpose.
But the non-registered contract is way more flexible, just without the immediate tax breaks.
That's the trade-off. A non-registered contract can be owned by anyone, an individual, a group, a corporation, and the owner can name a different person as the annuitant. Plus, you can transfer it or use it as collateral.
Okay, so let's clarify those three roles that always seem to trip people up. Owner, annuitant, and beneficiary.
The owner is the boss. They make the decisions, switch funds, name the other people. The annuitant is what we call the measuring life.
The measuring life.
Yeah, their life is what the contract's guarantees are based on. Their death is what triggers the death benefit payout unless there's a contingent annuitant. And once you name the annuitant, that's it. You can't change it.
And that contingent annuitant, that's only for non-registered plans.
That's right. You can name a contingent annuitant, usually a spouse, in a non-registered contract so that the contract just continues seamlessly after the first person dies. The last role, the beneficiary, is the simplest. They just get the money when the contract ends.
Okay, speaking of beneficiaries, we need to put up a huge flashing warning sign here about naming an irrevocable beneficiary.
Yes. This is probably the biggest trap an owner can fall into. It is rarely a good idea. Naming someone as an irrevocable beneficiary means you, the owner, give up a massive amount of control.
How so?
Let's say you need some money for an emergency a few years down the road. You cannot make any withdrawals, not without the explicit written permission of that irrevocable beneficiary.
So if I name my son and then I have a medical bill I need to pay, I'm locked out of my own money until he signs off on it.
You are. It is a monumental shift of power over your own assets.
Wow.
And just to nail down that idea of ownership, think about a spousal RSP. Jill contributes to an RRSP for her husband, Jack. Who owns it? Who names the beneficiary?
It has to be Jack. The money is for his benefit, so he's the owner and the annuitant. She'll just put the money in. So Jack's the only one who can name the beneficiary.
Exactly right. Ownership follows the person, not the dollar.
All right, let's make a hard pivot now. The regulatory deep dive. This is where we get into the really intense stuff with FINTRAC.
FINTRAC, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada. Compliance with their rules is non-negotiable for agents. The first obligation is client identification, or CI.
And when does that kick in?
It kicks in if it's expected that the client will deposit or receive $10,000 or more over the entire life of the contract.
That seems like a pretty low bar, honestly, for most
Yeah.
investment accounts. So what kind of ID process are we talking about? I see 3 methods listed.
And the process is rigorous. Method 1 is the simplest: photo identification. The person has to be physically there, and the ID has to be valid, current, authentic, and government issued.
Okay, pretty standard. What's the second one?
Second one is the credit file method. This is for when the person isn't there. You can use their Canadian credit file as long as it's at least 3 years old and the name, address, and date of birth all match up with what the client gave you.
It's a cross-check, and if neither of those work.
Then you have to use the dual process method, which is the most complex. It's the belt and suspenders approach.
Yeah.
You have to verify their identity using 2 independent, reliable sources. And independent is the key word. You might use a passport to confirm name and address, and then a completely separate source like a birth certificate or a bank statement to confirm their name and date of birth.
I noticed some provincial health cards are a no-go for this. Why is that?
It's usually because of provincial privacy laws. Those jurisdictions have put restrictions on using health information for anything other than, well, health. It just shows you how careful the system is.
Beyond just identifying someone, agents also have to screen for high-risk individuals, these politically exposed persons.
Right. We're talking about politically exposed foreign persons, or PEFPs, and then also domestic PPs, people who've held a high-level job in Canada in the last 5 years, and heads of international organizations.
And a client falls into one of those categories?
The compliance work goes way up. The agent has to verify the source of the funds, and they need to get approval from senior management just to keep the account open. It's a major risk mitigation step.
That seems like a lot to keep track of. But the biggest obligation of all seems to be reporting suspicious activity.
And this is where the rule is incredibly broad. Reporting is mandatory, and the bar for suspicion is very low.
Out low.
An agent has to report any transaction, whether it was completed or just attempted, if they have reasonable grounds to suspect it's related to money laundering or terrorist financing. A simple hunch is enough to trigger that report to FINTRAC,
regardless of the dollar amount.
regardless of the amount. Now, just to be clear, a large cash transaction has a very specific definition. That's $10,000 or more in actual cash notes and coins, not a check or a wire in a 24-hour period. That has its own reporting rule.
That gives us a pretty clear picture of the compliance side. So let's move on to managing the contract once it's up and running, the agent's ongoing duties. What does that actually involve?
It's an active job, not a passive one. They need to monitor the client address changes, a new power of attorney, things like that. And they need to monitor the product, a change in the fund manager, a big jump in the MER, or, a substantial loss in value.
And there's a requirement for how often they should be in touch, right?
Yep, the guidance is clear. Agents should meet with their clients in person or virtually at least once a year. That annual review is for checking in on life changes and making sure the product is still a good fit.
A big part of that management is making adjustments, which usually means a fund switch. What's the difference between a scheduled and an unscheduled switch?
A fund switch is just selling units in one fund to buy them in another. Scheduled switches, like an automatic annual rebalancing, are usually free. Unscheduled switches are ones you ask for, and you might only get a few of those for free per year before fees kick in.
And I see a warning here about short-term trading.
Oh yeah, they really don't want you trying to time the market. A lot of contracts will hit you with a short-term trading fee, maybe 2%, if you switch units within 90 days of buying them. Sometimes they just won't let you do it at all.
The other big action is a reset for locking in gains. This seems like one of the major perks of the insurance wrapper.
It's a huge feature, but not every contract has it. A reset lets you raise your guaranteed value up to the fund's current higher market value.
What's the catch?
The trade-off is that you usually reset the maturity date, too. So your 10-year guarantee starts over for another 10 years from the date of the reset.
And can you just do that whenever you want? Or is it automatic?
It can be both. An unscheduled reset is one you initiate to lock in a market high, but you're usually limited to how many you can do. Then there are scheduled or automatic resets that just happen on their own, but only if the market value is already a good bit higher than your current guarantee.
Okay, let's wrap this up with the end of the line. Claims and termination. When a claim happens, what's the real practical difference that guarantee makes?
The guarantee is a contractual backstop. If, at maturity or death, the market value of your funds is lower than the guarantee, say 75% of your deposits, the insurance company has to pay the difference. They top it up. That's the core benefit.
We should probably clarify the difference between surrender and termination.
Good call. Surrender is when you cash out before the maturity date. Termination is what happens at maturity. Both end the contract. And for any withdrawal, full or partial, you need the withdrawal form.
And that form requires the signature of the owner
And any irrevocable beneficiary. Which brings us right back to why that's rarely a good idea. They literally have to sign off on you getting your own money.
they have veto power. What about claims made by someone with a power of attorney?
The agent has to treat instructions from a person with POA for property just like they came from the owner, for withdrawals, surrenders, that sort of thing. But, and this is important, the agent has a huge ethical duty to report it up the chain if they suspect the POA holder isn't acting in the client's best interest.
One last technical point before we wrap.
Yeah.
For non-registered contracts, there's this concept of income allocation and the adjusted cost base, the ECB. Why is that important?
It's all about avoiding double taxation. Any income the fund generates, interest, dividends, gains, gets tracked. It's allocated to you, the investor, each year, and that allocation increases your ACB.
So it raises your cost base.
Exactly. So when you eventually take the money out, you're not taxed again on income that's already been accounted for. It keeps the whole thing tax efficient.
You know, this whole deep dive has really shown the incredible level of legal and regulatory structure that's built around what just looks like an investment. The FINTRAC rules, the precision needed for roles, it's all designed for safety.
It is. And understanding those little details, the ID methods, the reason why letter, the power of an irrevocable beneficiary, that's what lets you really appreciate what an IVC is trying to do. It's delegated risk management with a contractual guarantee.
Which makes you think about where the real value is. We talked about those automated tools like scheduled switches and resets that are designed to take the emotion out of it.
Right. Which leaves you with a really interesting question to think about. Is the most powerful tool you have as an investor not chasing market highs, but just the peace of mind you get from handing off that complex risk management to a contract
Hmm.
Is the real value of a seg fund not its performance, but the steady, unemotional safety net it provides no matter what the market is doing.
Something to think about. Thank you for providing the source material for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.